So welcome to our first video for Year 10 GCSE. Aim of these videos is for us to talk through the resources that we're providing and to give you a bit of teacher input, which we couldn't do otherwise. The way this will work is, like I say, I'll talk over each slide. Where there's a task, I'll ask you to stop and do something. You can pause the video and then press play when you're done. So actually we're going to start straight away with one of those. So have a look at these 7 images. What I want you to do is try and work out which image goes with which sort of title and of the name of the feature, basically. So pause the video. I'll talk again in a few seconds and we'll see what you guys got. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to do that. Let's see what we've got. So first of all, floodplain. We have a look which one's a floodplain. Well, the floodplain is that sort of large flat area next to the river. And it gets its name because it's plain. It's a sort of flat area and it floods. If we look at a meander, there actually is a couple of meanders I can see here, but the one which is the most obvious, and in fact just has a meander, is that one. And a meander is just a technical name for a bend in the river. Right, then we get down to estuary. Estuary is basically when the river meets the sea, and if you have a look, it's a type of river mouth, we'd call that. You'll see it's that one all the way down there. A gorge, you should have hopefully looked at this in previous lessons, but a gorge forms when you have a sort of waterfall retreating and you end up with a very steep sided valley. So hopefully you've got that one. That's that one over there. Now, a V-shaped valley is basically, as the name suggests, a steep-sided valley, typical of the upper course. And again, if we have a look, that is over there. And that leaves us with 2 left. So a waterfall, again, nice and simple, it's that one there. And again, typical of an upper course river, and an Oxbow lake, which is a sort of middle course feature we're going to look at later in the lesson. So hopefully that's got your brains back into gear and it's made you think about what some of those features might be. Okay, so what is it we're actually going to teach you today? Well, what we're looking at is the landforms that are formed in a middle course. You're going to need to know the key landforms, and there are 2 key landforms really that are important. We're going to talk about their formation, and we'll do some exam questions looking at the formation of them. So that's what we want to be able to do by the end of today's lesson. Now, just to remind you, hopefully, when we're talking about rivers, what we do is we divide them into 3. And you can see in this diagram, this is called a long profile, and you can see at the sort of bottom that, let me just try and highlight here. You can see down here, we've got the distance from the source being up here, at the very start of the river, and the mouth being down here where it meets the sea. And you can also see we've also got the sort of pattern of sort of slope. You can see how steep the river is and how it goes from being very steep to start with to almost flat, sort of less than 1 degree when we get to the bottom. And we call these upper, middle and lower. Sometimes they're called reaches, sometimes they're called courses. We're actually going to call them courses. I've used this diagram because it's quite nice and it showed it quite clearly, but like I say, we'd call them upper course, middle course, lower course. Some books will call them reaches, like you can see here. Now, the important thing is as you go through here, things change. So if you start, it's very steep. The river is actually flowing down. It's got down a steep gradient. It's got lots of energy. Now, actually, that energy doesn't mean it's necessarily going very fast. Think more like a tractor. It's quite slow, but it's really powerful. And what you'll see is that when you've got this sort of environment, you end up with this sort of vertical erosion. You can see here, it's sort of drilling down and creating a steep V-shaped valley. When we get lower down, what happens is that sort of vertical erosion changes. Now, the river isn't as steep in this sort of section, in this sort of down here. We're talking about these sort of areas here. In fact, it's a lot less steep, but actually it'll travel as fast, if not faster, because it's not actually doing as much vertical erosion. It's not fighting against lots of rough, irregular edges. And so actually the river starts to change it and the valley starts to change. So the valleys become wider, and instead of drilling down vertical erosion, what you have is lateral erosion and deposition. And if you have a look here, you'll see that's really what's going on, talking about here. That's what we're looking at today. This idea of the rivers moving from side to side, eroding one side, depositing the other. And next lesson, we'll start looking at the lower course and having a look what happens when deposition is more important. So that's just to give you a context of where we are. Let's say your previous work looked at processes and upper courses. Now we're looking at the sort of middle courses. So let's have a look and think what we're actually talking about. So if we're talking about a middle course, really what we're talking about is still got a bit of a valley, perhaps a wider river than we had in the upper course. There will be some moderately sloping land, but nothing really steep. And we'll be seeing erosion, and that'll be forming our sort of river cliff and our river beach. So we're going to look at how that happens. So middle sort of course features, again, you can read this, you can pause the video and you can have a read of this. Basically, it's this idea of the river flowing from side to side. And like I say, I'm not going to read through those notes. You can read those, stop the video if you want. Let's get into the nitty gritty and let's have a look at what's happening when we have got the river actually going from side to side. Now, again, there's a fair bit of text here in the PowerPoint. If you want to stop and the video and have a good read through this, you can do. I'll explain this in my own words in a second when I've got a diagram. You'll also notice on the PowerPoint there is a video here. It's a good little BBC bite-sized clip. In fact, you can see hopefully the link to it there if you want to type it in. I'll put the link in the YouTube video description, and it's also in Teams. You will need to use this information and the video to do the next task, which is to basically draw a diagram of a meander and fully label it. I'll talk through on the next slide what that's going to look like and what's going on. So, like I say, watch this video, have a good read of the information on the left-hand side here, and if you're ready, go on and I'll talk through it again. Hopefully, you can see what's going on. So these are two really classic diagrams of a meander. And a meander is a technical name we give to a sort of river that's going from side to side. Now, the first thing you need to understand is that the river does not flow the same speed across the whole river. Basically, the more friction there is, the slower it will go. So this is looking across the river here. We call the cross section. And what you'll see is that actually in this part of the river, it's really quite shallow. And what that means is that there's lots of friction. And so you end up with slow flow. Where it's going very slow, you will get deposition. The rocks will be deposited, and what will happen over here is you will get what's called a slip-off slope form. Sometimes it's known as a river beach, but it's a zone of deposition. So where it's going slow, it dumps sand, and often if you look at a photo of a meander, you'll see sand on the inside of the meander. If we go on to the outside, what you'll see is that look, over this side, it's really deep. And what that means is there's very little friction, and so you get the fastest flow. So here, just about here, is the fastest flow, and we call that, okay, the Thalweg. Okay, and you can see here, okay, and again, let me just use a colour. What should we use? Red. You'll see that the Thalweg, now this is looking from above in what we call plan views. If you're in a helicopter looking down, moves from side to side. It doesn't go in a straight line. And that's really important. So we've got this idea of a cross section. We've got the idea that this fast flowing bit of river is going from side to side. Now, there are a couple of reasons why it's going fastest from side to side. Partly, that's where the deepest water is, and partly, just have a go at running around a corner. If you think about, I don't know, Olympic runners, they don't like being on the inside because it's really tight, so it's hard to go fast. If you think of a Formula One car, as they come around a corner, they swing to the outside to maximize speed. But going on the outside of the bend is faster. Not only is it faster because it's easier, but also it's where the less friction is. Now, because that's where the less friction is and the water's going fastest, it means you get erosion here. And so if you look at a meander, what you'll find is that you've got a zone of erosion on the outside here. That's going to get eroded away. And you've got a zone of deposition on the inside here. And if we look over here, you'll get deposition here. That's where this was. And you will get more erosion on the outside here. And so that is what's happening in a meander. Fast flowing water on the outside causes erosion, means that you get erosional features. The classic erosional feature is the river cliff. So it's basically just a cliff on the side of a river. On the inside, slow water, shallow water, deposition, and you get a slip-off slope, or sometimes it's called a river beach. Now, your job is using the diagram we've got here, using the notes from the last slide, using what you've seen in the video. You have to copy these two diagrams down and in your own words explain what's going on using all of those technical terms. So stop the video. If you want a clean version of that diagram, just stop the video and go back a second and then pause it. Copy those diagrams down, go back over your notes, make sure, okay, you've got a really good detailed diagram showing both the plan view and the cross section, and you've explained them. And when you've got that done, we're going to go on and think, well, hang on, if we've got erosion here and we've got erosion here, what's going to happen over time? That's the next question to think about. But for now, you get those diagrams done. Now, one thing we need to do before we actually move on is just think about a skills check. So you can download this sheet from Teams, and what I want you to do is just simply draw this sort of line graph showing depth across a river. And if you have a look, what you will see is that on this column, you've got the distance from the left bank. This is the left bank here. And in this column, you've got the depth. Okay, and you have a notice, you've got the depth here in meters. And what you're going to do is you're simply going to plot the data. Well, the first one is 1.5 meters and it's 2 meters. So I'm going to put a dot there. Just put a little cross, just make it clearer. At 2 meters, it's 2.2. So I'm going to put a cross there. Where are we? 2.5 meters is 2.2, and so on. And then you're simply going to join the dots. I imagine it will look something like that. Then it asks you to identify where there's erosion. Well, that's between 0.5 and 2 meters. So this is the zone of erosion. And it will ask you for deposition. And deposition is from 1.6 meters, sorry, not 1.65 meters onwards. So this will be the zone of deposition. So have a go at that. Label it. Where is, it says the key features. So where is the river cliff? Well, the river cliff is here. And I think I've just proven I can't actually write with this. Full marks of perseverance. And I'm going to use colour for the inside of the bend, where it is I would find a point bar, or here, or a river beach. Okay, so have a go at that, and then we'll go on and talk about what happens when two meanders meet. Okay, so like I said, we need to think about what happens here. You've got erosion going on here, and you've got erosion going on here, and presumably at some point those two bits of erosion are going to meet, and when that happens it forms something called an Oxbow lake. Now, an Oxbow lake, okay, is basically an old meander. So just like we did previously, I'm not going to read out the information there. You've got some text on the left hand side. You've also got another video here, again another little BBC bite-sized video. Hopefully, there we go. You can type that into YouTube if you want. Again, I'll put the links on to Teams and in the notes to this video. So have a look at the video. read it, and we'll talk through again. I'll talk through in a second what's happened. Okay, so just like I say, just so I've got my explanation here, basically in a second we're going to ask you to draw 4 diagrams. These might well be the 4 diagrams you want to draw. And what you need to do is explain what's going on. So diagram 1 over here, okay, shows our sort of meander, and we've got our foul web, we've got our fast flowing water going here, coming around here. Notice it constantly saying on the outside of the bend, and that's where the erosion is. And what that means is that you are going to get erosion here and erosion here. Now, this bit in between here, we call the neck, okay, and that neck is getting narrower and narrower and narrower. Now, eventually, what will happen is that, and you can see it over here, is that where that erosion has actually been moving, the sort of making the neck smaller and smaller, eventually the water has now managed to cut through the neck. Now, I always think of rivers a bit like teenagers. So if you gave a teenager a job of going from here to here, okay, let's call that X and let's call that Y. There isn't a teenager in the world that's going to do this. It's just too much hassle. And water is exactly the same. So water is just going to flow that direction. It's just going to go there. It's hardly anything's going to move around the old meander. And what that means is that if it's not flowing very fast, you get deposition. So you'll get deposition here. And where you get deposition here, that cuts off that meander, and you end up with this. Okay, this is your Oxbow Lake. And it's called an Oxbow Lake because basically this shape here is very similar to the old bows, the old things they used to give oxen and shire horses to pull the ploughs. And obviously lots of this land was farmland where these formed, which is where it got its name. And so that is how an Oxbow Lake forms. So your job now is to draw 4 diagrams. Like I said, I would go back and use the 4 diagrams I just had, and then using the information in the key boxes there, okay, you can either annotate it yourself and explain it, or if you prefer, you can add in those 7 labels to your boxes. But what I want you to do now is I want you to stop, and I want you to go draw 4 diagrams and make them fully labeled for me. Okay, well, hopefully you've got your diagrams now of a Oxbow Lake and a meander. So I thought it's probably a good time now to have a go at an exam question. Now, thinking back to the work you've done previously, what I've done here is I've gone and given you a sort of answer here. So this one's answering for V-shaped valley. So it's using the information we looked at previously. And I want to think, I've tried to do this as good as I can. I think it's a decent top-end GCSE, possibly even A-level answer. Certainly wouldn't disgrace a decent A-level student. So what makes it good? So have a look at this and just think, first of all, have a read. How many key terms have I used in this answer? Okay, I'll just stop the video for a second and see how many you come up with, and I'll highlight them in 1 second. Okay, so this is what I've come up with in terms of key terms. So I've talked about upper course, I've talked about vertical erosion, this idea of it drilling down. I've talked about types of erosion, so hydraulic action. I've talked about abrasion, I've talked about the river's load. I've talked about different types of weathering. I've talked about mass movement, that's the movement of material downstream. I've talked about transporting. I've talked about V-shaped valley. So one of the reasons why this is actually a really good answer is I've used lots of technical terms. But the other thing that makes it a good answer is I've tried to explain myself. Okay, so it isn't just I've put loads of technical words down, I've explained what those technical means, I've used those in sentences. So now have a read where, okay, on this is the explanation. And again, I've just highlighted some bits here, but the point I'm trying to make is a really good answer, okay, has that mixture. We're really going for top end answers, technical terms and explanations. That's what we're looking for. So I've done one and I've gone through what I'm looking for. Your turn. Okay, so stop this video. Give yourself 4 or 5 minutes, okay, explain how an oxbow lake forms, try and use technical terms, try and use meander, erosion, hydraulic action, deposition, neck, terms like that. Okay, if it helps, you can even use diagrams. But stop the video, have a go at this, and we'll talk through how it can be marked in a second. Okay, so hopefully you've had a good go at this. Okay, now it's interesting to note that this sort of question, we often sort of tick mark it as teachers, but actually in the exam, it's going to be marked like this. Okay, it's sort of level marked. We want a clear or a basic answer. And what we really want is a clear, detailed answer. Okay, notice that what we're after to get 4 marks is not every single fact, every single stage included, but we are after a logical structure and we are after key terms. So this is the sort of thing I'd be after. So the first thing is you really should be mentioning the fact that it forms from a meander, that you've got sort of 2 meanders next to each other. You might want to talk about that it flows faster on the outside, and that, okay, means that there's going to be erosion. And again, the top answers would be talking about hydraulic action, the force of the waves and the water hitting the side. You'd be talking about the neck becoming narrower, okay, as you've got erosion on either side. Then you'd be talking about the sort of neck being cut through, okay, and often that happens during a flood, but you've got that sort of catastrophic moment where the water suddenly is going in a completely different way. Remember, the river is a bit like a teenager, so it'll take the shortest route, and you then have deposition seals off the old meander to form the Oxbow Lake. So that's what we're after. If you don't think you've got all those details, use a bit of red pen and have a go. Okay, so just to end now, quick little plenary, just to get you thinking. I've got here 12 features. Some of these are upper course features, some of these are middle course features. And all I want you to do is stop the video, have a think, which one's which. Okay, well, I hope you had a go at doing this. Let's just go through them very quickly. So first of all, vertical erosion. Okay, remember vertical erosion is going to occur where you've got sort of steep gradients, lots of energy. So that's going to occur predominantly in upper course. So hopefully, he says, there we go, upper course. Okay, whereas lateral erosion and deposition, that's the movement of side to side, is going to happen when the water's perhaps traveling faster, but more importantly, the gradient is less. So that's typical of the middle or lower course. Waterfalls, gorges, steep sided valleys, again, that's vertical erosion. So that's going to be upper course. Meanders, you'll get at all stages, but they're much bigger and they're much more dominant in the middle course, okay, because you've got that lateral erosion. V-shaped valleys, again, steep V-shaped valleys, that's going to be vertical erosion. So vertical erosion is going to be the upper course. At the source of the river start of the river, that's got to be in the upper course. That's where the river starts. Likewise, a narrow river, okay, is going to be in the upper course, and I've just noticed that that's a mistake. So let me just try and cover my blushes by colouring that in. Gentle gradient, okay, is going to be the lower and the middle courses. Steep gradient is going to be the upper course. The wider river, practically that's going to be the middle or even the lower course. It'll get wider and wider as it goes. Oxbow Lakes we've just talked about, that's typical of the middle course. And again, the wider valley, again, is typical of the middle course. So I hope that's been useful and you've got your head around the difference between the upper course, where you've got lots of erosion going on, lots of energy, and you've got, say, the river drilling down to cause waterfalls and V-shaped valleys, and the middle course, where the river actually hasn't got as much energy, but is moving from side to side. Okay, so you've got a mixture of lateral erosion and deposition. If you are happy with this, okay, then your next job is to go onto Teams and have a go at your online test. So if there's any questions or anything you're not sure about, email us and I'll happily answer. But hopefully that's got your head around it and we can see how you've done the test. So good luck with that, and I hope this has been useful. Thank you.